Tem ali o cartaz do lançamento com o QR Code, vocês podem baixar, está disponível na página do nosso programa. Bom, voltando à mesa, hoje nós estamos iniciando agora a terceira mesa do seminário, intitulada do Small Data ao Big Data, novos dados, métodos e técnicas diante dos desafios do planejamento e gestão do território. Eu vou rapidamente contextualizar essa mesa, que diante das novas tecnologias de informação e comunicação, nós tivemos uma série de impactos e também oportunidades no campo do planejamento territorial que ainda são pouco compreendidos. A agenda em torno do tema de cidades inteligentes, por exemplo, aponta frequentemente e de forma otimista para um aumento exponencial da capacidade de coletar, processar e transformar dados em informações, conhecimento e inovação para aperfeiçoar o processo de tomada de decisões de planejadores e gestores. Ao mesmo tempo, as desigualdades socioespaciais implicam também em assimetrias no acesso de dados, assim como disparidades na capacidade de transformá-los para influenciar o rumo das políticas territoriais. Assim, essa mesa tem como objetivo debater as relações imbricadas entre o campo do planejamento territorial e a disponibilidade de novos dados, métodos e técnicas de análise. Nós queremos abordar as seguintes questões nessa mesa, discutir e debater. Como que a chamada revolução dos dados vem influenciando a estruturação de agendas de pesquisa no campo do planejamento territorial e a produção de novos conhecimentos. Também queremos discutir quais as suas implicações em termos de novas oportunidades, desafios e contradições para a pesquisa e prática do planejamento, em particular no contexto brasileiro, com todas as suas desigualdades. E também queremos discutir quais os principais problemas e perguntas deverão guiar as pesquisas na área no próximo período e quais os principais desafios epistemológicos, técnicos e institucionais para a agenda futura. Bom, gostaria já de agradecer a presença dos nossos expositores. A nossa primeira palestra será com o professor Fábio Kohn, que é professor titular do Instituto de Matemática e Estatística da Universidade de São Paulo, é PhD em Ciência da Computação pela University of Illinois, at Urbana-Champaign, tem 30 anos de experiência em desenvolvimento de software e atualmente conduz pesquisas nas áreas de sistemas de software, ciência de dados e cidades inteligentes. Em seguida, nós teremos a exposição de Rafael Pereira, que é pesquisador do Instituto de Pesquisa Econômica Aplicada, o IPEA, e é doutor em Geografia pelo Transport Studies Unit da Universidade de Oxford, e tem entre seus interesses de pesquisa no campo de estudos urbanos regionais, políticas de transporte, mobilidade urbana, organização espacial das cidades, acessibilidade e desigualdades sociais e equidade. A terceira palestra será ministrada pelo professor Estevam Bartoli, professor da Universidade do Estado do Amazonas, do campus de Parintins. Ele é doutor em Geografia pela Unesp de Presidente Prudente e realiza pesquisas nas áreas de Geografia Urbana e Análise Territorial, com ênfase em sistemas territoriais para o desenvolvimento territorial em cidades da Amazônia. Como debatedor, contamos com a presença do Dr. Antônio Miguel Vieira Monteiro, que é doutor em Engenharia Eletrônica e Ciência da Computação pelo Centro de Ciências Espaciais da Universidade de Sussex, no Reino Unido. É coordenador, atua na divisão de processamento de imagens do INPE, Instituto Nacional de Pesquisas Espaciais, coordenador do Programa Institucional Espaço e Sociedade do INPE, do Laboratório de Investigação em Sistemas Socioambientais. Muito obrigada pela presença, Estevam e Rafael também, que estão à distância. E eu passo a palavra para o professor Fábio Kohn.
Obrigado. Dá para apagar isso aqui?
Podemos direto. Deixa eu
Muito obrigado aí pelo convite, é um prazer enorme estar aqui. De certa forma, eu sou um outsider aqui, porque eu sou um cientista da computação, da ciência de dados e desenvolvimento de software há muito tempo. Mas que eu fui chamado aqui porque faz pouco mais de 5 anos que eu estou trabalhando em aplicar ciência da computação para problemas urbanos. E, em particular, tem bastante interesse quando a gente olha para o território das cidades e como que a gente pode utilizar dados existentes ou novos dados que a gente coleta sobre o território para analisar eles. Eu sempre gosto de fazer apresentações baseadas em exemplos de projetos que a gente tem executado, e é o que eu vou fazer hoje. Então, eu vou ilustrar através de projetos como a gente tem usado ferramentas de ciência de dados, de aprendizagem de máquina e estatística espacial para oferecer suporte para a elaboração de políticas públicas. Então, uma coisa que a gente tem observado é que, infelizmente, as políticas públicas no nosso país têm sido muito pouco baseadas em ciência. Né? Tanto os governos de esquerda não gostam muito de utilizar ciência para a elaboração de suas políticas públicas, quanto nos últimos anos a gente viu uma radicalização do negacionismo e do desprezo pela ciência por parte da direita. Né? A gente vê, por exemplo, até que a população também não está muito interessada nisso, né? A gente vê muitos políticos sendo eleitos na última eleição porque foram contra a ciência. E é uma coisa que a gente, por outro lado, tem também a gente batalhando para que se utilize mais ciência nas políticas públicas e a gente espera que isso melhore. Eu sou otimista a longo prazo. Acho que muito lentamente a gente está melhorando nesse aspecto e nós aqui, acadêmicos, cientistas, temos que batalhar muito e forçar para que isso aconteça, porque senão vai vir de forma espontânea dos gestores públicos, nem da esquerda nem da direita. Mas eu acredito que agora a gente tem uma oportunidade nos próximos 4 anos de ter uma influência maior nisso, mas a gente tem que batalhar para isso, porque se for pela inércia não vai acontecer. Tem que ligar o meu passador aqui de slides. Então vamos lá. O que a gente tem feito está no contexto de um grande projeto que a gente teve aprovado há cerca de 5 anos atrás, que é esse que a gente chama de projeto Intercity. A ideia é desenvolver pesquisa relacionada à internet aplicado a cidades inteligentes. É um projeto que é financiado por FAPESP, CNPq e CAPES, que tem pesquisadores de todo o país. Eu peço ali para o pessoal que está na mesa, talvez minimizar essa telinha aqui para não ficar em cima. Isso, vou botar lá para isso. Então, são universidades de todos o país, são 9 universidades, mais uma empresa startup, tem até a Federal da UFABC aqui também, trabalhando em conjunto. Então, a gente tem aproximadamente 100 pesquisadores e estudantes desenvolvendo pesquisa científica e tecnológica nessa área. O foco principal, quer dizer, não diria que é o foco principal, tá? Uma das coisas que a gente mais faz é elaborar pesquisa, desenvolver as pesquisas e ter publicações científicas em veículos internacionais de primeira linha. Esse é principalmente periódicos internacionais de primeira linha, é um dos nossos objetivos. Mas não só isso. A gente tem também como objetivo desenvolver software livre que possa ser utilizado por outros pesquisadores e por governos e ONGs. Então, a gente tem, por exemplo, governos e ONGs já usando o software livre que a gente desenvolveu. Sempre quando a gente gera dados, a gente libera todos os dados como software, como dados abertos. E a gente tem um interesse também em fazer transferência dessa tecnologia para governos. Eu diria que o nosso sucesso é de cima para baixo, quanto mais para cima, maior sucesso. A gente tem tido bastante sucesso em publicações, bastante software livre, geramos menos dados, e a transferência para governos a gente tem investido bastante, mas é o mais difícil, e eu diria que é por causa dessa falta de cultura de governos em utilizar a ciência como ferramenta, mas é algo que acho que a gente não deve desistir, deve continuar tentando, Só que a diferença é que a gente tem que fazer muito mais esforço. Com, sei lá, 2 anos de esforço ali, que eu gero várias publicações científicas, eu consigo um micro avanço ali na transferência para governo, mas acho que vale a pena, precisa ser feito isso, não basta gerar os artigos científicos. Tá? E eu vou falar, então, eu vou apresentar alguns exemplos mais rapidamente do que a gente tem feito, e depois um exemplo que eu acho interessante, que é um trabalho recente, que eu vou falar em um pouco mais de detalhes. Tá? E eu preciso ligar meu cronômetro, eu vou ligar, para tentar não estourar o meu tempo. Então, por exemplo, a primeira coisa que a gente observou é que a Prefeitura de São Paulo tem uma demanda, tem um departamento que tem uma demanda para fazer análises geográficas. Tipo, então, é um órgão público que quer usar ciência, então já é algo raro no Brasil, mas o que eles fazem? Eles usam tecnologias do século XX para fazer isso. Então, eles têm lá o GIS deles ali, uma tecnologia da década de 90, e é o que eles faziam. Então, quando o secretário de saúde pede uma determinada análise, eles ficam lá trabalhando em cima dos dados com as planilhas Excel e os GIS, e depois de 1 mês, eles geram um arquivo PDF e mandam aquele arquivo PDF para o secretário. Quando chega no secretário, ele nem lembra porque que ele pediu aquilo, mas já chegou lá. E eles entraram em contato conosco e falando, não, a gente gostaria de ter algo mais ágil. E a gente desenvolveu isso que a gente chama de Health Dashboard, que é baseado nos sistemas de internações hospitalares da cidade de São Paulo, utilizando apenas dados públicos que estão disponíveis no DataSUS. Né? E com isso, por exemplo, esse é um sistema que a gente desenvolveu, e você consegue colocar num banco de dados com interface geográfica e amigável para o gestor público uma série de informações, em particular, sobre todas as internações hospitalares que são feitas na cidade de São Paulo, no SUS. Então, por exemplo, a gente vê, se não me engano, tem cerca de 80 hospitais que atendem pelo SUS na cidade de São Paulo, e tem uma série de análises que podem ser feitas com esse sistema interativo. Então, por exemplo, de acordo com a especialidade médica, qual que é o deslocamento que o paciente precisa fazer da casa dele até o hospital para ter o seu atendimento hospitalar. E a gente vê aqui, por exemplo, essas barras vermelhas são pacientes que precisam de mais de 10 quilômetros se deslocar, normalmente em transporte público, para ter o atendimento domiciliar. Então, a gente vê, por exemplo, que em psiquiatria, 50% dos pacientes precisam se deslocar mais do que 5 quilômetros e 25% dos pacientes, um quarto tem que se deslocar mais do que 10 quilômetros para conseguir ter o atendimento domiciliar. E esse tipo de análise pode ser feita depois, entrado no detalhe, de diferentes formas. Então, é um sistema que oferece uma interface interativa que permite você analisar por diferentes recortes, por exemplo, por doenças, leucemia, HIV, dengue, e a gente vê que diferentes doenças têm diferentes distribuições geográficas na cidade de São Paulo, e isso aqui são mapas interativos que o gestor pode fazer zoom para dentro, zoom para fora, pode fazer recortes por sexo, idade, faixa de renda, pelo tipo da complexidade do atendimento, se foi uma internação de alta complexidade, baixa complexidade, quanto tempo que ele ficou internado, etc. E, uma vez que ele fez o recorte e solicita a visualização dos dados, isso aí, em 5 a 10 segundos, ele tem a coisa pronta. Então, algo que antigamente demorava 1 mês para ser feito, agora um usuário qualquer ali da secretaria consegue fazer de 5 a 10 segundos. E só usando ferramentas aí, nada muito sofisticado, você precisa de uma boa equipe de desenvolvimento de software e uma dedicação de entender qual é o problema, que tipo de uso o gestor precisa, e você consegue desenvolver algo desse tipo. E eu acho incrível o quão pouco usado esse tipo de ferramenta é pela gestão pública no país. O custo para se desenvolver um sistema desse tipo, por exemplo, numa parceria com uma universidade, é uma fração mínima do que a Prefeitura de São Paulo gasta em saúde em 1 dia. Mas, mesmo assim, não fazem, né? Porque não existe essa cultura de utilizar as tecnologias e a ciência do jeito que está disponível. Então, outras análises, você pode fazer uma análise, por exemplo, do perfil de cada hospital, você pode fazer perguntas tipo, onde moram os pacientes que precisam se deslocar mais do que 20 quilômetros para ter o atendimento domiciliar? E a gente vê ali grandes áreas vermelhas que deveriam ser áreas, por exemplo, o gestor público poderia utilizar isso como um guia para decidir onde precisa ampliar o sistema de internação hospitalar. Ou onde mora o mais frequente da internação, a hipertensão, onde moram os pacientes que sofrem de hipertensão. Então, ali, de novo, você vê áreas onde, por exemplo, deveria melhorar o atendimento para hipertensão e assim por diante. Tá? Então, e é possível desenvolver esse tipo de ferramenta em várias áreas, que é uma coisa que eu diria que é relativamente simples, mas o gestor público não tem a noção de como isso pode ajudar ainda, infelizmente. Gasta-se quantidade enorme de recursos de outras formas menos úteis e coisas simples que poderiam ajudar não são feitas. Né? Acho que depende de nós, cientistas, mostrarmos para eles o poder disso. Outra vertente de trabalhos que a gente tem feito é utilizar ferramentas modernas de inteligência artificial e aprendizado de máquina para analisando dados do território, poder prever coisas. Por exemplo, prever a ocorrência de surtos de dengue. Né? Então, analisando dados de ocorrência de dengue, de presença do mosquito, de nível de precipitação de chuvas, de temperatura, ao longo dos últimos 8 anos, a gente foi capaz de desenvolver um modelo que consegue prever com uma boa precisão a ocorrência de surtos de dengue na cidade do Rio de Janeiro, por exemplo. Então, a gente vê que, quer dizer, nossa ideia inicial era prever o número de casos de dengue em cada bairro do Rio de Janeiro, com uma antecedência de 1 mês ou de 3 meses. A gente viu que prever o número de casos a gente não consegue tão bem assim, porque às vezes o nosso modelo diz que vai ter 300 casos e acaba tendo 600 casos. Mas a gente consegue prever muito bem os surtos de dengue, que é o mais importante ali para o gestor público. Né? Então, a gente consegue prever no Rio de Janeiro com entre 75% e 80% de acerto que vai ter um surto de dengue em tal bairro específico daqui a 3 meses. O tipo de ferramenta aí, eu diria que isso é uma tecnologia mais moderna que os gestores públicos, principalmente na área de saúde, mas talvez em outras áreas também, poderiam começar a utilizar mais. E acho que é interessante porque, de novo, é uma coisa bem ligada ao território, né? Você fazer predições baseadas em dados que se coletam de forma no seu território geográfico, e você faz as previsões também levando em conta o espaço. Né? Não é só levando em conta tanto a população que vive naquele território, quanto os dados que você coletou do território. Um outro exemplo que a gente tem trabalhado mudando completamente agora, saindo de saúde e indo para a mobilidade urbana. A gente tem feito trabalhos para ajudar políticas públicas no incentivo ao uso de bicicleta, em particular, como que você constrói ciclovias e ciclofaixas utilizando ciência. Uma primeira estudo que a gente fez foi usando dados dessas bicicletas compartilhadas que existem em centenas de cidades no mundo, e também dados de pesquisas origem e destino, que são feitas com as pessoas, identificar onde estão os principais fluxos de bicicletas na cidade. Então,
bikes in the city. For example, you have in this chart the analysis of data from 8 million trips in the city of Boston. And by assessing 8 million trips, we can see clearly the main flows of bikes. And plotting that with the bike lane infrastructure, public managers can very quickly identify trades like this one, where there are many bike trips, there's a lot of circulation of bikes without the proper bike lanes that should exist. This is an interactive dashboard, and public managers can interact through this dashboard. And this is our version for the city of São Paulo. Those who would like to access can see it is available, bikescienceweb.intercity.org. We have this specific analysis for the city of São Paulo. Here we have 2 maps side by side. We can establish a few filters. and make clear comparisons between the flow of bikes in the morning, the afternoon, before the pandemic, after the pandemic. We can make visual comparisons of the bike flows in the city of São Paulo. It is also a tool we encourage CET in São Paulo to use that for the management of the bike lanes. And we also have developed some mathematical models with migration models specific for bikes. Well, our dream would be to have less people using cars and more people riding bikes. What people are able to do so and during what type of trip. So this is our idea, how we could help with public policies. We discovered through qualitative studies that the lack of safety is one of the biggest hurdles to the use of bikes in the city of São Paulo. So we tried to define where these bike lanes and bike paths should be built in order to maximize this migration from the car to the bike. And then we could offer that to the city hall so they could optimize this bike lane infrastructure. We made an assessment with 185 potential bike users, especially people who do not use bikes right now, but they would like to if there was a proper infrastructure. We used the web tool developed by us. They used the possibility or how easy it would be for them to use bikes in 925 different assessments and trajectories in the city of São Paulo. With that, we prepared a mathematical model considering what the inhabitants of São Paulo would consider ideal in this case. We reached the final result here, considering the whole city of São Paulo. The red dots are the points of the city of São Paulo where we do not have bike lane infrastructure, but if there was this type of structure, we would have a huge potential of conversion of trips and other transportation modes for bikes. Those marked in red, if I'm not mistaken, are 23,500 trips. You can see that on the red dots. And in yellow, we have that street segment and the trips. In red, we have 23,500 trips. So we can see in some zones, some specific corridors, where there are thousands of trips every day that could happen by people riding bikes if there was a proper infrastructure. So that's a map, and public managers can use this map in order to decide where these bike lanes could be expanded using science and data analysis. That's the type of thing we would really like to see more in the definition of public policies for the future. Now I'd like to go into more details. This is a more recent work I really like. And I believe that some of you have been working on a few of these items. This is a work on the regionalization process from the Unified Health System, SUS. There is an NGO with this study for elaboration of public policies in healthcare. They have a problem, which is the following. Brazil organizes its unique health system in regions and macro regions. That has begun with the SUS, the Unified Health System, with the new constitution, and it has evolved and improved. This regionalization process organizes municipalities in order to plan the actions related to healthcare services. And in these regions, managers have the freedom of defining these regions related to healthcare. We have groups of municipalities, specific groups, and you will not have all the medical specialties in every municipality, especially the most complex ones. You'll have some of those in a specific municipality, usually the largest one. So people need to commute from their municipality to another one in order to have access to healthcare. The whole country is divided in macro regions and regions for healthcare. The distribution of financial resources for hospitals and healthcare equipment distributed, focusing on these healthcare regions. The question from the SIH was, is that working properly in Brazil? In order to answer this question, we used public data from DataSUS. And to me, there is a huge amount of data which is not used almost for anything in terms of improving the quality of healthcare, but only to transfer resources and funds from one governmental level to the next one. There's a lot of things related to the analysis of the healthcare system. Many things could be done, but they are not done. Data is available, but very few people access that data. So this is a tool, and it has a lot of data. It's possible to make many analyses on the healthcare through there. And we have a system called Complex Systems to help in the assessment of the healthcare regions. So every time a patient is hospitalized, we know where this patient is hospitalized at and where the patient lives. In our case, we looked only at the Brazilian states.
Quais as perguntas que a gente quer responder?
Okay, here are the questions we would like to answer. The movement of patients is related to this definition of healthcare regions. How much? Is there an evolution in the self-sufficiency of these regions during the latest years? And the changes in these healthcare regions during the years have changed the movimentation of patients. Were there improvements? We are out of time, so I need to jump a few slides, and I will not go through the methodology we used in details. Basically, we used community detection algorithms, which are clustering algorithms in data and charts. Spatial algorithms, the one that worked best was the InfoMap. So what have we done here? We collected data from all the hospitalizations during the last 30 years in Brazil. One of the students of our master's was able to insert data from all the latest hospitalized people through the unified health system. And she made an analysis of all the hospitalizations that crossed the borders from one to another municipality, and she created a table with millions of lines like this one. In 1994, a patient from the state of Rio de Janeiro left the city of Teresópolis and went to São João de Meriti. This was one patient only in 94. And in 2020, we had 277 patients that went from Duque de Caxias to Nilópolis. And applying all these algorithms, we are able to make this type of analysis. So, for example, here we have different colors, and we can see what the algorithm says for the communities, the healthcare regions that exist in reality, looking at the movement of patients. On the black line here, we see what the law says on what the healthcare region should be. And we can see here that we have a few differences in some places. There is a region here where instead of going where they should go, people are going to the capital, to the city of Rio de Janeiro. In some other regions, the same thing happens. Rio de Janeiro is a state where regionalization worked well. In other states, it did not work as well. And we have other states here. In this case, also, it worked well enough. We have some discrepancies, however. Once again, this is an interactive tool we developed, and discrepancies give information to public managers so they can make a more clear assessment of each case to evaluate what could be done, what could be improved. What does that indicate? Maybe there is not enough funding in that specific region and healthcare is not working properly in that region.
And we also assess like the evolution along the years. So we can see like Rio de Janeiro state improved quite a lot in 1995. So coincidentally enough, what was happening between like the health regions were only like 45%. And now it's almost like 90% in terms of coincidence. So there was a big evolution in the quality of health. But the regionalization is happening in the way it has been forecast. And it is being used by the public managers. This kind of analysis between states, like the federal manager of the health department, can see how this regionalization is working in the country. Within each state, the manager of each state can conduct an analysis based on the performance of that state. There are other things that I'm not going to show you in detail, but we have this web interactive and open system that anyone can check in. And then you can click on the link that gives you an interactive tool. It's difficult to read it on the screen, but so believe me. So here, this is the state of Rio de Janeiro, and it shows all the patients flows like for checking in. So once again, you can promote like cohorts and using different medical specialties. What are the flows for relations related to cancers or pregnancy or cardiovascular diseases. So you see that the flows are changed quite a lot. And the public manager may assess related to medical specialties, how good and how well things are working in terms of regionalization. And then they can see where problems are happening. And this is a map that shows with a little bit more details in terms of regions that things are working properly and things that are not, and especially related to the evolution along the years. And then the manager can check any years, like for the past 25 years, and see how things were happening in a specific year. And then we have older analysis that can be conducted using different kinds of diseases. And there's some cases that were in the state of Ceará and regions that work quite well in the Sobral region, and other areas that don't work quite well. And then they have to move to the capital, and it takes like days to get there. So this work, they give a very interesting contribution to the academia. That's why we've been publishing in good places. But what interested us the most, and our main challenge is for the years ahead, is that we can contribute practically, that the public managers can change the way they actually manage. So under the detail, we have to look at the limitations and related to the health regions in the country. We show the evolution along the time, but there are other variables that we are not taking in consideration. Sometimes it improved, people moving better because there was a new road that was built and we were not taking that into consideration, or economy improved and people are traveling more, or unemployment increased and people are not traveling that much. So we have to take everything in consideration. In a tool like this one cannot be used blindfolded. So you must need a human being to use the tool to have better analysis. The tool by itself doesn't produce the analysis. We've been working and we have new works using like seasonality of diseases in the country and looking at the geographic space. And we have another area like related to urban violence in the city of São Paulo and looking at the territorial space in the city of São Paulo. So basically, this is what I had to tell you. This is a website where you can find all the papers that we publish in the health area. We have the interactive dashboards that can be used And everything that we do is open software. So the code is open source code. So thank you very much for the opportunity. So thank you very much. So now I would like to pass the floor to Rafael. So let me just share my screen with you. So can you hear me? So I believe that you can hear me well. I can't hear you. Hello, hello. I can't hear you. Okay, now, yes, we can hear you quite well. Thank you very much for accepting this invitation for this lecture. So the system here is like one speaks and the other one listens. So while I am speaking, no one is listening to you. So once I pass the floor to you, wait for 3 seconds and then you begin your presentation. Is that okay? But thank you very much for your presence here with us. So now I'll pass the floor on to you. Give me the 3 seconds. Thank you very much, Flavia and everyone for inviting me. So I was a little bit skeptical that I would be making my presentation and you wouldn't be listening to me. But now everything cleared up. So thank you very much for being here. And I'm getting closer to the rest of the personnel there. So my name is Rafael Pereira. I am a researcher in IPE. And this is a very sui generis research because we work with the federal government and we have research, we publish material, but our work is basically to enhance public policies. We have a very large space here with bodies from the federal government and in some cases with the state municipalities and cities. And today I will talk a little bit about within my research area, a big shift, a transformation that it's quite interesting when it comes to urban mobility. So I will talk about the silent revolution of public transport data. What are the opportunities and challenges that we have ahead of us? So what do I call silent revolution? So we've seen in practical terms, a big revolution in mobility data, either available or more easily available. So when we think about the last 2 decades, we have a lot of data, GPS on vehicles, private vehicles or public transportation. We have a GPS in mobile phones and data from mobile phones using a triangulation of antennas. We have a lot of people working with geolocalization and mobility of mobile phones with different sensors and Wi-Fi connections, and also electronic ticketing and smart cards. We see it autonomous vehicles and cameras in traffic and also like portable devices. So we have a large amount of like different sensors and different database that have like new things like novelties, and also making things more available for people. And these things that I've been talking about, they promote a big change when we talk about like transport in urban cities. And this database, they are quite different, but we have another database that is used, that the way I see it, and in my presentation I'll show you, that has a very important role in the transformation of what we consider when we think about urban mobility, but they're not being so well celebrated. And that's why we have the silent revolution. We have an important role, but people are not really paying attention or praising it the way it should be. And this white revolution is happening related to the GTFS. It's a general transit feed specification. And the GTFS, it's a database of a public transportation. It's a standard format on how you organize your data related to public transportation. So it's very simple, and I'll talk a little bit more about it. And it brings like geolocalization information of the database of the routes and schedule and frequencies and the geometry and timetables and so on. So it seems to be quite simple. It's a database that brings a lot of basic information when it comes like to public transportation, and all city halls in the world use this, and they have this kind of information. And the problem is that this information is organized in a very different way. So each transportation secretariat organizes their data in a different way. What we are going to, some people are using like different ways of like sorting and using the data. It's a big mess. So around the 2000, like the Google got together with the transport authorization, and they created this standards. What is the reference? So stop to think. One of the big advantages that Google has, especially with Google Maps, is to bring population to use Google Maps. And one of the big advantages of the Google Maps is that you can enable people to navigate in the transportation system or plan the trips using Google Maps. When you go to Google Maps and you say, I want to go from my city to the university, Google Maps traces this route using public transportation system. So can you imagine how crazy that would be for Google, like to have all the different Google transport systems in the world? Because each city hall organized that data in a different way. It would be unfeasible. So Google Maps had this initiative with an agency, and they created this standard format. It used to call Google Transit Feed Specification, but then it changed to General Transit Feed Specification. And around 2004, 2005, they launched the first version. And basically what Google says, they talk to all cities in the world. So if you want to have like a transport system for your citizens to use Google Maps, send the data in this particular format, and then Google, being Google and having the reach that they have, they created the GTFS, became the standard to be used. So all big companies in the world work with transport apps and planning. All the mobile apps that you use to have like the routes for public transportation, they are fed with these GTFS, Google Maps, Bing Maps from Microsoft, or Move It, or Transit, or any other. So they all use the GTFS. One of the big insights of the GTFS, it's a very interesting format. This is what GTFS is. It's a file, it's a database. So send it to me like someone requests from São Paulo. So in this file, you will have many different tables. So a file that has a table informing information related to the agents, or they're related to routes, or trips, or calendars, or schedules, and so on. For all these different tables, it's a database, relational database, that you can associate information. So basically, your information, very simple. All the transportation agencies have that organized in a pattern that is very easy to be organized, and it's a friendly use, and then you can read and process them. And it became like the pattern all over the world. So GTFS became the pattern that is used all over the world for public transportation systems, and the global standard for open transit data we had more than 600 cities all over the world, more than 1,300 transportation agencies that were sharing the data in an open format, in this format, GTFS. I'm not even talking about the cities that have this data that are not openly sharing, but I can say that in Brazil, we've been working between 50 and 80 cities, at least in Brazil, that you gather this information in the GTFS because they have the information in this format. Unfortunately, most cities in Brazil do not have this available yet. We have like a half a dozen of cities that I can talk a little bit more about them. And why does it create a silent, quiet revolution? Practically speaking, once you have this pattern, standard format, it's so easy to read and process, and it's been shared by many different transportation agencies all over the world. It creates a common ground for learning.
It creates a shared environment of technological development and data analysis, which can be developed and applied in different contexts. So what does it do? It leads us to a transportation consultancy like they have in the United States, developing a tool for public transportation planning, which may be used, for example, by Barueri's city hall or another city hall from Kyoto in Japan or from a city in India. This tool makes an estimation of the emissions from public transportation in the city of Brasilia or Manchester in England or South Africa. So you create a global community of collaboration and tool development, which transforms what we have seen, the planning practice in the public transportation system worldwide. It's a silent revolution. However, people do not think a lot about it. This is extremely important to think about two things worldwide. One of them is the access to opportunities, and the other one is the emissions from vehicles. The access to opportunities is the main benefit in the public transportation system. When you plan a public transportation system, you have special lanes for bus or subway lines. You have many benefits. You may improve the quality of the air, but the main benefit you wish to gain is to give easier access to people, to hospitals, schools, public services, and so on. And one of the main challenges faced here with urban transportation is emissions, pollution. From the viewpoint of local externalities, and sometimes there is huge losses for public health and some global issues like climate changes. In my presentation today, I'd like to tell you how this data has been used in order to think about both things, allowing us for a huge expansion in our research, accessibility and emissions. So first of all, I would like to talk about the urban accessibility. As I mentioned before, this access is the ease of reaching different places, people, to have more access to opportunities. So urban accessibility is not the traveling standard for people. When we talk about accessibility, we're not talking about the usual trips in people's daily life. If you have data from a survey considering the origin and destination of people, you know which mode of transportation people use when they leave their home and they get back home, etc. In accessibility, actually, we want to assess the potential easiness of having access to different places. So thinking about accessibility is very important. You need to have an idea of the main transportation modes that can take you from one point in the city to another one. And you can make an estimation of how long it takes a person to leave home and get to the closest hospital. How long would it take? It's very important to see. This map I'm showing you is an isochrone map. This is a very ancient map. It dates from 1920 to 1922 in the city of Melbourne in Australia. And this map shows you the following. If you leave the center of the train station in Melbourne using the railway system, which is what they used back then, how long will it take you to reach each region of the city? We are not talking about how many people left the center of the city and how many people reached another point. We are saying specifically how long it will take you to reach different places. To make this type of calculation, there is a process which is a relatively complex one, because you have many points of origin, many destinations, you have multimodal public transportation. There are many possible combinations. You can walk, you can take a bike, you can use public transportation, bus lines. So there is a very complex transportation system. So making this type of analysis is not so easy. It is not trivial. Well, it's becoming more trivial in the latest years. One of the tools that allow you to do so is the following. We have a huge quantity of tools which allow you to do it easily. You have the Grand Hopper, Urban Access, Pandana. I could mention many different programs that allow you to make this assessment. Most of them are free, open programs, and they combine data from the transportation with data from the streets to calculate accessibility in general. Usually these programs are written in Java, in Python, but you have a huge amount of programs that allow you to make this analysis. One of the main programs that do it, one of the most powerful programs is the R5 program. It was written in Java from people from Conveyor, which is a consultancy from the United States. It's a multimodal routing program. This R5, you have it in here. This is written in Java. Many people do not speak Java. That's my case. So in our team, we have developed a package called R5R. It's a way of using R5, knowing a little bit of R, and you are able to use it. Recently, we have released the R5 Python version. What does it do? R5 is used for quick and efficient routing analysis in multimodal transport networks. So using R5, you can calculate the distance of your trip from a block of your city to other blocks of the city. You can do it very quickly. You can do trip planning, isochrone maps, or calculate accessibility. All of that can be done with many other capabilities. R5 allows you to consider the following. If you are a bike rider, the route you choose will vary. If you know the movement on that street, if you know the terrain, elevation of the city, if there are bike lanes in that specific area or not, you can check. If you take a bus, your route depends on the monetary cost of your trip. If you need to take a bus plus subway, etc., there are many assessments you can do using R5. It is very simple. It's not hard to use. You can use data processing. To use R5R, you need to do three specific things. You need to point a data file where you have all this data stored, and you need to build your multimodal transportation network, and then you can plot it on step 2, the origin points, destination points, the transportation means you're going to use, the time you intend to leave. On step 3, you can do many different things. You have a specific function which allows you to calculate the time from each origination point to destination points very quickly, in the blink of an eye. There is another function which is called detailed itineraries. You can make specific planning. This algorithm is very similar to Google Maps. So when you tell Google Maps, I want to leave my home and I want to get to my university at a specific point, Google Maps will tell you, you leave home, you walk onto the street, you wait for 10 minutes for bus number 40, And that's your trajectory. So what R5 does, and Google Map does, is planning your trip from door to door, taking into account how long it will take you waiting for the bus, the commuting time, and so on. And R5R allows you to make the accessibility calculation. There is a specific function called accessibility. In this example, on the right side, we are in the city of Porto Alegre. If you use public transportation living from specific blocks, how many schools would you be able to access in 20 minutes? And as I mentioned before, I will not go into many details because R5R is only the tool. What is really important is what we can do with the results we obtain using this tool. But as I mentioned, this is only one tool. There are many, many other tools. But in order to tell you something good about R5R, people from Toronto University published an article last year where they make a comparison between the performance of R5 with other programs that make routing analysis. So you have the comparison with ArcGIS, with ROTP, Python OTP, R5R, and M. This is a confusing table. However, I'm just giving you an idea of how R5R can be quicker. If you calculate the travel time using this, considering the destination and origin, you can see it's 204 times quicker than ArcGIS, 300 times quicker than M, for example. If we make a data analysis, considering 10,000 origin points to 10,000 destination points, ArcGIS would take 49 minutes to run it. Python will take 4 hours. R5R can do it in 8 minutes. So you have that time matrix. You can make this analysis very quickly. In São Paulo, for example, which is a great, huge region, you have 100,000 origination points and destination points. No program was able to finish. However, R5R took 18 hours. We are talking about extreme cases here. Anyway, this is just to show you one of the possible tools you can use that are available in the market. And this made it possible to have a quick technological development using this tool. And R5 and R5R are tools I really value. We developed them. They are great tools and cause great impact in the performance of our work. Why is it important to have a very efficient and quick R5R? Because it's used in the project we have established at IPEA, which is called Project Access to Opportunities. The goal here is estimating for each year, for each block of the 20 largest cities in Brazil, the access to jobs, hospital, schools, and social assistance areas. We use open data always, and all the code we use is based on open data. And the main goal of the project is making all of that publicly available so that professors, students from graduate and postgraduate students, transportation agents, government members can use it to improve transportation policies, education policies, and so on. Why is R5R important to us? It's an important project. We make annual estimatives. We did it since 2017. We do hope to continue to do so in the next years. We make accessibility estimates. Walking, riding bikes, using public transportation, car, bus, for the 20 largest cities in Brazil. We have data for public transportation in the cities, and we have accessibility data for all transportation modes for the cities on the top here. For those below, we have only for active transportation and car. Imagine calculating for each block the trip times and accessibility for these 20 cities. In the case of Goiânia, for example, and all the region surrounding Goiânia, we have more than 1 billion observations per year for each city. If we did it on OPP or ArcGIS, it would take a long time. So to us, the use of R5R is essential because it's very quick and efficient. When I talk about accessibility, there are many ways of measuring accessibility. It's a concept, the ease to reach a specific point. You have many different indicators to measure accessibility. Two quick examples here, looking at the municipality of São Paulo. On the map on your left, you can see the quantity of jobs that are accessible in up to 60 minutes traveling by public transportation. If you live a specific block in the city of São Paulo, and if you could walk and use public transportation in any direction, walking up to 60 minutes, how many jobs would you have access to? You are well familiarized with São Paulo, so you can see immediately the bus corridors and subways and trains that go through the city. In the East Zone, you have a shiny point here, which is a subway station. Even people who live in the East Zone of São Paulo, which is a less developed region with worse economic indicators and less commercial activities. People who live close to that bus station can very quickly connect to the public transportation system and having access to activities concentrated in the center of the city.
So check that this is not a distribution in terms of jobs. This is how the public transportation network and the spatial connectivity increases the capillarity of access to the opportunities. And somehow it decreases like the inequalities in terms of geographical space. On the right-hand side, we have another indicator that shows how long it takes to get to the closest hospital. So this map shows like in each neighborhood, how long does it take for you to get to a closer neighborhood, closer hospital. So the yellow part, it shows that it would take you like less than 5 minutes. And then the green, like between 10 and 20 minutes. And this areas like in the dark blue, areas that it would take more than 1 hour for them to get to the closest hospital. So these are good indicators of accessibility. And they're very powerful indeed, because so you show it to the Transport Secretariat and you show it to different agencies and they can't understand what's going on. They know which areas in the cities are more or less well served by public transportation and so on. So we do have other indicators that we calculate. And as I mentioned before, so even like using a bike or public transportation peak hours, that you have like good or bad quality or high or low complexity. And then we can promote like social benefits. So this calculation is done for each quarter in the city, and we know what is the social economic profile, and we can conduct analysis of income and racial inequalities. In a very recent paper that has been published and that is going to be published in the maybe next month, we have an analysis related to economic inequalities and racial inequalities and access to health services in Brazil. So just looking at the cities that we have data related to public transportation, we can compare access to hospitals and the amount of hospitals, high complexity, accessible to public transportation between white and black people and high and low income. So you have this little dot, like the pink dot that is hidden. It's the low white population and the other one, the black low income population, and the dark blue like low income and the other one with a high income. So from the standpoint of a ratio, so you have inequality between whites and blacks, and the average you have like the square and the dots. You have a difference between whites and blacks, and you see all the different activities that the black population access less than the white population. But when we control this, so you see that inequality decreases. So among poor people, white and black have the same level of accessibility. And among rich people, white and black have also like the same amount of accessibility, where the different, means just a few cities like Goiânia, Belo Horizonte, and Fortaleza, that the rich have, white ones have more access than the rich black. So most of the inequality related to racial, but mostly due to the economic, and social, that the rich people have more access than the black. And then we have in some cities, we have like a rich person could access about between 10 and 12 hospitals, and a poor person would reach less hospitals. And to do all that, we combine a lot of information, topography data related to the city, and how we use the route that you do and the kind of transport that you use, data population. Usually we use like data that comes from EBGE and the land use data, and what the geographic coordination and the GTFS and the road network open street map. So everything is done basically, once again, it's a tool that is relatively simple. In fact, it's very simple and very efficient, that handles most of all the data that is necessary to have this kind of research or analysis, like to inform the public transportation system. So, and everything is accessible due to the GTFS. This is what opened the possibility for many different tool development. So we are very glad to see how GTFS opened up this revolution that was creating a lot of problems in terms of analysis before. And remind that this access to, when we talk about accessibility, we're not only talking about transportation, we are talking about the integration of transport with the use of land. That literally you break the silo of the transportation and the education secretariats, and then with one concept of accessibility, you can promote this analysis that you can integrate everyone to the same table and be on the same page. And then you can use the transportation system in an integrated fashion with the use of the land and the movement of people and regulation and the use of land and so on. So now I only have like 5 to 7 minutes to finish my presentation, and I will talk a little bit about the transport emissions. This is a project that we have been leading together with João and Pedro, my friends at IPEA, and we are developing a methodology like to estimate it, scalable methodology to estimate like public transport emissions, like using the least amount of data, and something that can be reproduced and with open data that will enable us to understand the benefits in terms of the environment and the implications of like electrification policies. To do that, we are developing the GTFS to emissions. We are going to transform the data of the GTFS in estimates of emissions. This is a model that we are going to estimate the emission in each vehicle, 20, 50 meters, like very few seconds of all the public transportation system. And basically, we have to send two main kinds of information, the GTFS of that city and a fleet characteristics. So basically, to do that, it's a table, a generic table. 20% of my fleet are standard manufactured in 2008 and diesel, and 2% electric vehicles and so on. Or maybe you can have a detailed table for each vehicle, each characteristic of each vehicle, and what is happening in the transportation system. So these two inputs that mainly you need for the system, and then you have to select the pollutants that you're going to analyze. And then we have a very broad possibility. And what is the model of the emission factor that you're going to use? And basically, we have many different agents here related to the environmental agencies in the world. And here in São Paulo, we have this to a controlled environment, and you use many different buses running, and then they measure what kind of the pollution of each one of them. So then you can say for one bus with this specific characteristics running at this speed during this time, from our measurement tools, we expect that this bus is going to emit like X grams of CO2. So what the package is going to do is going to combine all these kinds of information, and without you knowing, on the background, this package of GTFS EMIS has another package, which is the GTFS2 GPS. What this package does, we'll get all the data for the GTFS, that table that I was showing you before, and it's going to convert the table in another database of trajectories. It's like a table of like a GPS, like imagine a GPS table in a bus. You know that each line is related to time and route. With this database, you can analyze the trajectory of, in terms of time and length of the public transportation, as if you were creating a GPS data, artificial, of how that transportation system should work. And then you have many different and interesting analysis, like to understand like the trajectory related to time and different routes and different trips. And you can think about the coupling of activities and how the frequency of the different lines vary along the day. And practically speaking, at the end of the day, what this package will do is we'll get the GTFS, we'll have this trajectory data with the information of the fleet that you send and the emission factors that you have chosen. And here we can choose different uses, like in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, and the European Union, and it will create the amount of each pollutant of each vehicle in each street segment in a different time of the day. And we have just like published and made available the preprint of the article that explains the methodology of this package. We are turning it in like to the COP, and we expect that to have this packet published. The paper will be published very soon. In the paper, we show the methodology organizing all the data in the city of São Paulo, and we can estimate the amount of CO2 or particulates spread all over the city. And here we have in, you can zoom in like downtown São Paulo. And for those who understand, São Paulo can visualize it quite easily and understand like the high and low capacity of transportation system. And you're going to have more vehicles in specific areas or garages and so on. So this is the spatial distribution. And we can have this related to time and space, how all the information concentrates in terms of space in a short space of time, and you can have a very interesting analysis. What makes me very thrilled about the project is that the main source, data source, is the GTFS. And as the GTFS is a very simple and pattern and standard used all over the world, this kind of methodology can be easily applied in any city in the world, or almost any city in the world, as long as they have the GTFS. So now we are finishing a paper that uses the methodology, and we are beginning to write a new paper according to international standards and partners that we are going to set up a comparison of the environmental performance related to public transportation along with many different universities in the world. So we have the analysis of low emissions in the city of Houston and 10 emissions in Australia, in Sydney, and Curitiba in Brazil, Rome in Italy. And once again, even if you do not know the cities, you will be able to see like the corridor for transportation in the city. Our analysis, our recommendations that we can bring to this analysis a comparison for many different cities in the world, and also bringing the amount of people carried during the day. And public transportation is not the villain of the environmental pollution when we consider the amount of people that move about. But it would be interesting to identify the different performance in the different transportation means when we can compare them among themselves. And then how you can forecast information. The methodology is very easy, like to create a simulation. How much in terms of CO2 you would not be emitting related to information and renewing like 15% of your fleet, for instance. And then trying to understand also like in terms of the environmental issues of people and neighborhoods that are more prone like to use public transportation. Is there a bias like in terms of like economic and social, that some groups are more vulnerable than others, and so on? 1 minute to finish my presentation. So what are the limitations that we have? It's a very simple, and that enables the use of a lot of different tools that can be shared and generate a lot of learning among researchers and developers. But it has some limitations, some of them being tackled. So data of the GTFS only brings you the service of transportation systems that have been planned. It's a little bit different from what the population receives. If you compare GTFS data with the GPS data, you might have some difference related to the speed and frequency and so on. So this discrepancy, it's important to have in mind. And we also have some works in Toronto and Fortaleza and some cities that are using ways to use the GPS data to calibrate and enhance the information that you have in the GTFS. Also, the GTFS doesn't bring information related to the passenger capacity and crowding, and if the vehicle is allocated or not. And it's very different when you have a trip, like 15-minute trip or 15-minute walking, depending on the time and the peak hour. So this is a limitation that's very important for us to mind. So Renato is from USP, has this wonderful work, and one of the papers written in his doctorate says he combines this data, GTFS and GPS, trying to identify how the allocation of passengers in a vehicle could impact comfort of these passengers and also the perception of the time for the trip. So if the trip lasts 15 minutes, if you are sit, or if you were standing and crowded, and it would seem to be half an hour.
All the info of GTFS has limits in terms of information, in terms of the prices of tickets, and the standard GTFS is relatively dynamic, so they are implementing some changes this year and next year in order to improve it. But we have the static and standard GTFS. It has not good costs for the tariff. Besides that, GTFS has different info, so we can really inform if that train station or bus station has specific things that can be helpful for the access. However, all that info is not well informed by the agency, so there is a possibility of having available information. However, we have this challenge. We don't know how rigid is the quality, how good is the quality of data which is being shared. Well, I would like to give you a general idea. I did not tell you a lot about our research, our publications. However, I can send it to you later in the chat on the link of our project so you can take a good look at it. I believe I can give you a better view of what GTFS is, the opportunities, the challenges involved, and mainly for researchers and public managers who would like to use these tools related to the transportation system. We have great opportunities for accessibility, fleet planning, trip allocation, but we have important challenges here related to the GTFS, and all of that needs to be overcome by combining other info, other data related to GPS, or improvements to the quality of the GTFS that are being created. We can share that data publicly, but that is a subject for discussion later when we have the discussion session, okay? That's what I had to say.
Rafael, muitíssimo obrigada.
Rafael, thank you very much. As I was waiting 3 seconds, that's why it took some time. Thank you very much for your presentation. I would now like to give the floor to Professor Stephen Bartoli. You have the floor, Stephen. Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Esteban. I'm a geographer. I have been introduced previously. I live in Amazon. I do hope my internet will not cause any problems, will not fall. Can you hear me? Yeah, great. So it's a huge pleasure to be here. I come from ABC. I'm very happy for being here talking to you from the Federal University. I have been living in the Amazon region for 20 years. So I would like to tell you about these researches on the urban process, how the data evolution will give new possibilities and paradigms, bringing new challenges to this region and to those who live here. I have problems with my screen here. Oh, it's working now. I apologize. I would like to tell you about the Amazon state. It's on a where we have huge inequality. You can see the city of Manaus here and other cities. We have huge problems of inequality. 98% of the GDP of the state is in the city of Manaus. So this leads to a very different opportunities and structures. So the history of the state has increased this inequality. This is the industrial pole of Manaus, which collaborates to the very low GDP. These lighter regions here show the lowest income rates in Brazil. What type of data can I collect and what would they be used for? I wrote about the paradigms here. Once more, we can take a look at the production. It's very, very different. The access to information in the region, you can see that on the map on your left, in the huge inequality of certain regions. This, in the end, will create different types of data collection, which we really need. I will talk about the issues that our panel is focusing on. There are other 5 researchers involved in this. Let us talk about how their agendas are being influenced. Universities in the Amazon region are really recent. We have campus in many different cities with very poor internet connection. So besides the interiorization of the universities, we are trying to strengthen other regional actors, other agencies, secretariats, NGOs, collectives like the indigenous population, quilombolas, the river populations, and many others, and even some companies of the industrial pole of Manaus. Now let us talk about the initiatives. What do we need in terms of data collection to connect the Amazon region? Many of them do not have fixed courses. They have modular courses only. So it is very small what we have in terms of knowledge spreading. Let us talk about the number of people who have doctorates. In the city of Manaus, not many. In Parintins, we have almost 80 now. And other poles. In the region of Tabatinga, on the border, well, that's one of the areas we have some people with doctorates in these regions I marked with dots. The idea is making this human capital have dialogues, and we should think about a data bank to foster the minimum development of the region. The situation is catastrophic. It's very, very difficult. Those who live in the hinterland know what is happening. We have a special initiative, which is HISA, the Human Resources Network. We need to put all these human resources to interact in the Amazon region. They're very, very fragmented. It's an initiative of the Science and Technology Secretariat from UFAM and the Acariquara institution. The idea is promoting the development and improving the economic situation through the interaction of human resources, promoting more collaboration between the groups of science and technology, the civil society, companies. Here, we have the hot spots of research. This was prepared by RISA. These are the areas with more human resources available. You can see the huge inequality of the urban network in the Amazon region. So it is very important to increase the networking in these research centers so as not to waste these human resources. We have very, very low interaction. We have a website from the RISA network. It is beginning now. We have many initiatives. They are just beginning. We have nothing advanced, as you have seen on the previous presentations. We are just starting. We are starting from the basics. And this is very exciting. We can think to whom we are going to give this data, what we want this data for. The network is in maintenance right now, but you can access and check all the info we have. Another initiative we have is IDESAN, the forest cities. Through the use of apps and platforms, we intend to promote the extraction and timber industry. It's very difficult to have good management. We do not have enough professionals and do not have the proper technology. We need to improve the situation using drones, for example. We are just beginning, but we do need to improve this access to the managed wood. I'll talk more about it. And then we have another initiatives focused on the use of data. The Vitória Amazônica Foundation is starting just now. Flavia will talk more about that. We have the Okara Samsung project here. It focuses on digital entrepreneurship. How can we focus on the popular economy? We want to improve the situation. And we have Rios Online. It's another initiative which focuses on climate changes. So how can we collect info on the economic impact in the cities and in other places? This is really a matter of great concern to us. I have been working with this first question proposed by our panel. Which type of researches we propose, and talking about new initiatives, what paradigms will we adopt so we do not have the draining of knowledge and the wealth from the Amazonian region? Historically, economic cycles have left lots of poverty, so this should not be one more draining element to perpetuate the inequality and poverty in the Amazonian region. Item 2, the new opportunities, challenges, and contradictions in the Brazilian context. I will talk about the context of the Amazonian state only. We have many institutional flaws. This is the pilot project. Institutions are unable to talk to the most dynamic initiatives. Innova actually tries to collect as much data as possible for the productive chains in Amazonia, like the cashew nuts, salmon. Not only here, we don't have only these 3 lines. We have the pirarucu fish, we have the hazelnut. We want to make the economic situation improve. 90% of the wealth of our state are located in Manaus, in the industrial pole. We need this data to work in other regions of Amazonia. So in order to improve these productive chains, we collect data we have to walk, go to the rivers. As Rafael mentioned, perhaps someday it will improve, but I am there under the rain and sun, and prices are very, very low. We sell these hazelnuts for very, very low prices. The interaction between producers should improve. We should know how they process these hazelnuts. We should learn where cooperatives exist in the lower region of the Amazonia. We have no idea how this is managed, how the pirarucu fish is managed. It's a very noble species. And for Guaraná, we have mature initiatives in there. The indigenous people, they process Guaraná in a special manner. They add value and they export directly to Europe. They have some autonomy. They do not depend on multinational companies and soft drink companies. I do not defend the idea that the traditional Guaraná should be only the merchandise. We don't intend to do that for Amazon. That's not the best way. However, this is a good idea. So the targets, we need to reduce the differences. Pirarucu is a noble fish. It's well known worldwide. People have no idea what the wild pirarucu is, but we should have more info on these value chains. And I do believe if we improve the data network and connections, that will improve. We need to improve the access to credit, and these networks need to be more articulated. Look at all the inequality that exists in Amazonia. So we have a new flexible capitalist paradigm. We should be very careful so that companies do not own all of that. Data helps us to gather information and to improve the knowledge. We have many issues related to patents, for example. It's very dangerous. We should give more tools to these populations so they can have more control of the data in this new cognitive capitalism. They can use data if they have enough knowledge. That is more important than what is done inside the factories.
And this is a very important issue in the production, is the cognitive production. So we cannot appropriate this. So as it has always been in the Amazon with the biopiracy. So what can we talk about like data? So there's a lack of empowerment for the population and use of the apps. I participate in 3 of them. So this is smartification, so to speak. So we work with the awarding in terms of like market and the territory. It doesn't happen in the Amazon. So everything that we have in the countryside, it's happening very fast. And the social struggle with this very frequent cases that we have available due to the data related to the patrimonial heritage. So I cannot using like the app or any kind of like a technological tool, we cannot remove the protagonism of this population, of this fights that are necessary for the formation of the resistances. We being contaminated by mercury, like a fire burns. When we open our windows, like we have like fires all over the place in the countryside of the Amazon. So we cannot talk about like the Amazon without feeling sensitive about data that is happening on the riverbanks, and then we are gathering this information. So we have a sequence of Nepicab has data of more than 20 years, and creating a methodology of the thematic networks with André Moraes is being conducting a wonderful work, and he followed like the necessary network. So fish and all the kinds of fishes. So there's a kind of fish that we have many different kinds of fish. It's a large amount of species, not as much value of the others. But we have to build up this network related to the data that we have from the fishermen and all the refrigerating houses that compose the thematic network. So we have this huge area here that I ended up like noticing that the urban network is built related to this sales of this kind of fish and fishes that migrate and go to other areas and other. So we cannot quantify, and like public people that do not use like the data and the territorial intelligence that we have, and then even more here in the Amazon, because we have the drainage of the wealth done by the mercantile capital and the outsourcing of the capital. But then it's being drained. Part of the funding of this network that Andrea has talked, and we have many other initiatives and methodological innovation. We have hunting of different fishes. And then I will talk a little bit about my research here in Parintins. So we finished my doctorate in 2017, and until this date, I've been looking at popular economy and the riverbanks and people that migrate to the cities very fast, but they end up like moving back to the original territory. And we were talking about transport, and I look at transport in a different way. Like we have canoes, and we have other kinds of river transportation that composes this popular economy, and it's huge here in the Amazon. And we have like this system of the riverbanks, and the central part here will always get in conflict and will be explored by the urban river territorial system, like big barges that explore the wood. We had like 35,000 tons of wood, and how this is being explored, the mercantile system and the other systems that we have of this new fraction that still dominates like the country. We still have to handle this kind of people that wants like to pass the cattle, and the wood is just like moving out. So we have to think about the urban space and how we have this migration of the hybridization of the economy and how things overlap, and we are missing like a scale. And I launched an atlas this year, and I sent it to Flavia to send to everyone with the result of 5-year research, the Parintins Atlas with urban and territorial planning. And we had an NGO here working with us. And then we have to look at the fishermen. I'm sorry that I remove the resolution of the MAPA and the maps, and the resolution is really low. But we have a large amount of the fishermen in Parintins that do not have access to the riverbanks. So you have an archipelago, and the riverbanks are being taken. Just like to give you an example of the problems that we have in terms of the data gathering, no one talks about it. And I had the participation of fishermen, and we map the areas that they are forbidden to dock. And we do not have roads in Parintins. So the central part of the Amazon is mostly used by boats. So some of the areas are privatized. There is a huge tension here, and it's important to get popular data for urban planning here in the Amazon area. So we have videos in on YouTube video, like urban fishermen, and they have important information to pass on. And then we have like conflicts, because we have the mercantile area like being invaded by, we have a lot of fights here. And this data is very dangerous, obviously. And we've been doing it with the support of the fishermen, and it's a new try like for cartography. And when we talk about like conflicts, like overlap of like power networks and urban spaces that we want to map them, like all the traditional boats and like fishermen and woodcraft boat makers. So no one cares for them. And when we are talking about, now we are facing like a drought. I believe that I've seen in the newspapers some of the boats, and here is like the dockyards and the protection of the boats, and how the embarkation end up like absorbing all the contradictions of the urban process. The social relations become more, and the cultural relations that become like gas stations or the production of bigger boats, and even more like the riverbanks, the population, they are left alone. And then I have this other map. So we have a centripetal like force. And when we talk about accessibility, here we have like minimum accessibility based on like 20 hours of movement, like to have access to doctors when they have access to doctors. So access to markets, health, and education. And this migration is being very heavy. And also we have a centrifuge strand where we have like these people that live on the riverbanks. They end up like using industrialized products and changing like their food habits. So this combination of two forces is very important to understand. And we have to put that in the map because we do not have the technological support. We have to do that eye to eye. And the amount of like wood, guaraná, and fish, and it seems like a joke, but we have like some areas that do not have the occurrence of people who work with like natural fibers. We have like slave labor here. So it's very important to create this complex chains, like to enhance their power. And we have to increase like this and diminish like this migration between the riverbanks and the cities. So the sovereignty of the territory, and not in a vague sense, but it's the food sovereignty and with quality and the life and the appropriation of the resource and the territorial space. So, and the implications, they also work as housing, and they drain the resources that we can see, like the person is moving like a refrigerator and a canoe with an engine, and they are moving like a refrigerator. I believe that you can see it. So it's an obvious comment. So Lula had like 90% of the votes, and he was the one who brought energy. So people have energy now, and then when we talk about like food, and they are voting like massively, and to those who brought the electricity, and this is the revolution. So we have the bad part that changes their food habits, but like here in the low Amazon, 90% was to Lula. In Manaus, Bolsonaro won. Just for you to understand like process and form between like the metropolis and the countryside. And the drainage role still works in for like income and the exploration of resources. When we talk about the rubber with gigatons that would exchange rubber for food, it's a very inequality in terms of the exchange of the economy, and very bad indeed, perpetuated due to this heavy navigation. And we have illegality to wood and fisheries. Part of the wood that composes like the popular economy. We have Barreirinhas, a city that is nearby. And we have like the city from the Thiago de Mello, the poet, was born. And we have these red arrows. And we cannot trade wood because it's made use like for housing and furniture, but it has an institutional relation of illegality. And I have to work with these populations instead of only say that they are victims of the illegal extraction. and they have to repose like the stocks that are being exhausted. Itaúba, a wood that is made like to build boats. It's very resistant to water and it's disappearing. So the last issue that we have, what are the main problems and questions that will guide research in the area? And epistemological challenges, technical and institutional. We are not going to be able to answer these questions. We have paradigms in terms of biotechnology flexible, to place the forest with knowledge that is being drained that could be used, and this appropriation of the forest, and also the exploration of the raw materials in terms of genetics and the valuation of ecological services. But this configurations of flexible will escape control of the local population. Therefore, what Newton Santos and Maria Laura have mentioned, to increase the territorial alienation. So this neocolonialism sustained by, I'm not talking about a more malleable work, but connected to the agribusiness. So this front all over the country comes very heavily. In the Amazon, even more, we have mining areas that we cannot. So you go to neighborhood cities that you have huge mining companies, but the water is not paved, and not water, not sewage. So when they have doctors here, you can look at some of the studies that we have. So the universities have been in the forefront and the dominant technology. We must have this critical way of looking at it, not to leave this people unattended and reducing and reproducing the dominance. So the formation of the Amazon has always been looked as the preparation of the territory, and recently it's been increasing. So the issues that we have and that we place for debate, what are the other paradigms that help us to understand the revolution of data and the dispute of the maneuver and appropriation? Which one of the paradigms work to annul or to hide or provide the necessary support to the local populations, and the hegemonic fronts that are moving, articulating the production in terms of the geographic imagination from the standpoint of a neoliberal conception. And here we have the population that we create a subjectivity that in the Amazon we could never compete with the dominant. So this acceleration in terms of time is maybe I can even say about data, not only big data, but not small data.
So which empiric and collaborative elements I can get from the Amazon population and their spatial practices, so I can have a constructivist basis for territorial planning. This should give us access to data in some level, and I'm here in a marginal territory. We all have many invisible speeches, and we have sent a letter to the federal government. It is a very tense situation, but we need to increase our visibility and improve this ideology, this green capitalism they want to make us swallow. And we have epistemic readings, cosmologies, and situations and differentiated temporalities that may lead us to renew the scientific praxis. I have almost reached the end of my presentation. I'd like to thank everyone for their attention. It was great being able to speak to you.
Muitíssimo obrigada, Estevam.
Thank you very much, Estevam. Now we'll be back to our panel. Will you stand here or should we get back to our table? I will now give the floor to our discussant, Antônio Miguel Vieira Monteiro. Thank you so much for being here, Miguel. You have the floor. First of all, I'd like to begin by thanking Flavia and the whole program for the amazing privilege and pleasure to be here. 10 years is an important celebration. I had the opportunity and the privilege of following all these advances. So congratulations to you all. I'm not sure I am the best person to be the discussant at this table, but we can talk about everything that was said, and I'd like to thank you for the amazing opportunity. First of all, we should celebrate the results of our elections. Now we feel less tense and we are more free to speak, and you can once again embrace a few people, Wagner, Rosanna, many people I haven't seen in a long time. It's amazing to see you all again, even if virtually right now, friends like Rafael, and meet Fabio and Estevam Bartoli. Is someone I met more recently. I got acquainted with some of his work through a very dear colleague. And just Tatiana, she's not even in Amazon now. She's at the World Bank in Washington. And, well, I am an engineer, so I believe it will not be too hard to comment on those things. As Rafael mentioned, he talked about space and time. I don't know how I can share my screen here. Let's get back.
Eu acho que a temática que foi proposta para essa mesa.
I believe that was the theme which was proposed for this table and coordinated by Flavia.
Ela é bastante importante porque ela renova mais uma vez.
It is very important because once more it renews a historical issue in territorial or space planning. Historically, we have two important matters here. What Estevam said, that we should rethink the imagination and construction, the images we create on the production of the cities, on the cities that are produced and the spaces that are produced. In the same path, we have a cycle of crisis and rebuilding. So planning seems to be always facing a crisis. Urban planning always faces crisis because in truth, our perception and our planning is individually and collectively associated to many categories. So within this renewal, historically, there are some moments when due to some factor, generally, we could say that for a long time, there are some technological factors that try to take on a specific role in the reinvention of the city and territory. Now is the time for big data, machine learning, and many constructions that obviously are specifically associated to one thing, which is very common in this long process we are undergoing, which is infrastructure. I cannot have big data without thinking about infrastructure. And when I think about infrastructure, I am thinking about this construction and territories that organize the city. So I'd like to talk to our three speakers. As Flavia mentioned, and the other lecturers said, we should think about the main issue we need to think about. I believe it's very important to have some diversity in our lecture, Estevam, and that is what I was going to talk also. But I thought about looking at this, focusing on three books. One of them is more recent, but we have three classical books. One of them is very interesting for us today. All of that moves together. I apologize, Flavia, I don't know. This is the one? Is this the book? Yes, that's the one. Just one. The first one is a 21 years old book. It's from two geographers that have been working with spatial planning for a long time. They work as planners. It's fragmented urbanism or splintered urbanism. That's the name of the book. It talks about what happened in 2001, but before that, this discussion was already ongoing. And we have a separate chapter here related to the information technology infrastructure. There are other infrastructures here for Fabio and Rafael to produce all that info. There is a physical infrastructure which is needed. It involves power, cables, many elements that will be in this collective space, shared space that form the city and spaces. In this book, Graham and Marvin discuss that we should look at these urban infrastructures. It's impossible to look at them without looking at them in a more integrated manner. I can and will produce fragmented territories. This complicates many issues. We need to think about the collective organization of the city. A second book which complements that is a book from 2010 from an anthropologist called Garcia Canclini. He's from Argentina. And this book is called Different, Unequal, and Disconnected. The focus of this book is the interculturality, but he says something very interesting related to the lectures we heard. We have three political matters that come from there. The issue of those who are different, the unequal, and another political issue is related to technology, which is present in the term disconnected. The political issue and the issue of technology. However, what I'd like to remember for the time being, in that book from 2001, from the splintering urbanism and the infrastructure network of the cities, is this matter of infrastructure, the integration into urban life. And from the second book, I'd like to remember the following. Looking at what Garcia Canclini says, we could imagine that these three matters that are raised by these situations that happen frequently in the places we live. We have differences, and Estevam mentioned that very clearly. He showed it to us. We do not have one Brazil, one territory. We have many Amazon regions inside one He showed the differences in the incapacity of this whole discourse of big data and smart cities. How can it fully work in such a complex space as that? Those who are different are entitled to difference. This is the first thing. The unequal, well, that's a different situation, perhaps closer when we look at the studies Rafael showed us for the metropolitan regions, some studies Fabio has shown us, and technology. However, these are political issues. Technology is also a political issue. And then we have a book from a Spanish journalist, her name is Sara Mesa, The Administrative Silence, Poverty in the Bureaucratic Labyrinth. I don't know if we have been dealing with that for a long time. She wrote this book in 2019, but we are taking all of that into account under the light of big data. Many things are being added to the state protection system, and all of that is creating for the systems we are going to deal with. There is difficulty to go into this maze. All of that involves the difficulties of access and the quantity of information. On the level of big data, which is going into administrative systems, all of that is creating many blind areas. So big data now, somehow, that is a problem we need to deal with. It forgets the small data from Steven. It should see everything, but actually it creates some blind spots. I'm freely adopting the idea from Lefebvre of what that is, but it's very close to that. So one needs to be very careful today with this newest reinvention of the urban spaces from the viewpoint of technology, and technology is a political issue. And the hardest question we'll see here, and I believe this was made clear during our discussion, I will try to show that to each one of our lecturers. There's an article they wrote 20 years later. I'll go back to that later. But let us have a conversation with Esteban, Rafael, and Fabio here. My summary of this story is the following. This discussion is not political. We do not have a politicization of this discussion about small data, big data, and urban and spatial planning. Is death. It's the path toward chaos. At the same time, this story and this discourse gains more space because it can build an image and it can be inserted in many sectors. Maybe Fabio knows more about it, but there is a bill of law for the National Plan of Smart Cities. So, at the same time, we are going to have a new government, but we have a bill of law, and I believe it would be a good idea for those who are concerned with planning in Brazil to start looking at this project.
So, we have, like Stefan brings this related to small data, and this position we cannot bring and not look at what is not covered, because what is not, then we will have this administrative silence in terms of planning, and it's going to be a blind spot that we will not be able to once again look at what needs to be looked at and integrated. So it's very severe, like to discuss big data without its counterpart, which is the small data. And this is what Stefan has to do. Unfortunately, he doesn't have the GTFS. He has to go to the port where the fish gets there, and he has to talk to the fishermen. And this is not going to happen only in the Amazon. This is going to happen in São Paulo and many different biomes. So in the biome in the metropolitan area may be observed with big data is very dangerous, very dangerous indeed. And we must be looking at it. And from what I heard related to that, so Stefan brings this, and he has in his text a reflection about the different the thoughts of Milton Santos and the others that I will talk about this informational technical system, but it's an appropriation of this logic, even though that the fact is that you have more, less interest, having more technology in the Amazon doesn't mean that if this infrastructure is being appropriated as a depolitization source, it will continue being perpetuated with models of paradigm that are a problem in the Amazon bioeconomy. Has many different bioeconomies. So which one is going to result as the more interesting for a development project for the region? And that is environmentally sustainable. But he brought this issue. I just would like to understand a little bit better when he says that when he places the situation in an inefficient distribution, fragmented, related to the technical means of information. But even though we must understand, it was very clear for whom and how this world is going to be there, but mostly understand how we can deal with small data, how we can build better technology for this kind of data. Our technology is centered in another kind of look that is looking at different markets and different territories, and it's placed in relation to a more homogeneity of groups and not the differences. So technologists must also look at these different groups that they work with and the territories that they are embedded. Rafael talked about the quiet revolution, which is very interesting, the standardization. It's natural, like to have technology movements, especially the IT, creating comparativity. But what Rafael presented to us somehow, what he's looking at, he wants to politicize the debates based in evidence, trying that the GTFS, and you can look at accessibility aspects. We have accessibility is the better definition of access geography, access to opportunity. And at least in the big cities where you have access, trying to make this a more political issue and use big data to make debates a little bit more political. But in many territories, they do not have the GTFS, and this is something that we have to consider. And lastly, and Fabio that has this incredible work related to technology and all the different levels of the software that we have that are necessary to sustain everything that Rafael showed us and are interconnected to debate in this project that he showed us. And we have like different categories with many different possibilities with like the smart city, as he mentioned. So it's a polysemic category that can be many different things. And with the setup, there's many things that it can be. It can be like different things that will lead us to new bubbles. And now we're talking about new bubbles. We have possibilities to have a fragmentation in terms of the territory and the metropolitan spaces, creating not only like internet bubbles, bubbles that we already know, but bubbles that are materialized in territories that are completely technified, with full access to technology and information. And we have a current discussion related to climate portals. And what are they? And once again, we can go back to Teresa Caldeira, but now we have a bubble. In my place, we have a preservation of the climate and structure. So once again, we go back to using a perspective that we have these technological tools. So the city is smart for some, and will continue to be not smart for others. So we have a very interesting paper. It's called the Holocene, that we have many different projects like related to real estate and ideas that are amazing. But we have a very interesting text from 2015 that we have this meta-analysis, how smart cities in many different places. And then the title is Less Smart, More City. Why? Because in this meta-analysis, in the end, they found out many different approaches and many different groups will emerge from all that. But what is alarming is that, so the smart of the smart city part, in each group, in each stakeholders group, they get the smart part of the smart city because it's a very fastly stored. But the part of the construction, the city of the smart city part, in terms of the collective, it doesn't appear, or very little is seen. And we see that in many different reports and articles and papers. So maybe this project of smart city, we have to discuss more city and less smart. And we have to discuss what we've been discussing, otherwise we'll be reinventing a project for the cities from the smart point of view. But when we have like the politics, and that is brought to the not connected, so we have these ideas of smart cities, we have to think about those who make technology over their own object. We have to think about the technological objects, and this is crucial because our capacity to produce is big, invent things, and create a tech object is very big. We have incredible opportunities. We've seen quite a lot, even Stephen, working with small data. We all can produce tech objects, a new technical object, but this technical object must be inserted in the discussion in terms of the policies, politics related to the structures. And I feel that we are missing out. We are being leaving these things behind. We have all these discussions are very important because we need this technology. We need this techno objects, but it's necessary that we discuss once again for those who need it, where and the how and when and what in each different place. So this is what I wanted to raise, because we need answers for this anxiety. When we have like 1, 2, and 3, generally speaking, what is the generation of big data? What is the epistemological discussion? And then just like to sum up, we don't have nothing new, but we still have a lot of novelties to think about how this avalanche of technical objects and informational objects must be placed in the spatial planning debate, and it hasn't been. And as I'm not in neither one nor the other, I can talk about both. So it has not been placed in the debate of the spatial planning. This debate cannot be under the city managers, cannot be only under computational science and engineering. This debate cannot must be in the planning itself. It must be part of the learning structure of the planner. We cannot dispute narratives if you do not know what's going on and that you are going to make use of it. So we do have projects under dispute, and these projects are the base of planning. But if the planners themselves do not want to join the debate, and I don't think that they've been joining the debate, so the space that they've opened up for non-planners. And I think that now those who are winning are not the planners. The winners of the dispute are not the planners. So this is the time to rethink about like planning and planners and students, those who are studying the territories. We must think that we need somehow to include like the planners. But I believe that we must include ourselves and include ourselves positively in the debate, because we cannot deny this avalanche of important things that these technological objects are bringing to us, possibilities like to produce and think and redo and understand the territories. But we must join the debate, bringing this political aspects to the debate, this arsenal of planning and this way of thinking and the spatial planning have brought until today. Moving away from it will be a big mistake. And even in the graduation and post-graduation programs, we should have like courses to promote the debate, understanding and disputing for projects. These projects will come, but they can come, as you have seen, from many different ways. One of them is a possibility, a scenario that it will create more blind spots than what we already have. So that's basically what I wanted to talk about. I don't know if this is what you wanted from me. So we began the session. I will extend the time, and I will pass the floor back to the speakers if you want to make any kind of comments. We have our discussants. We will open up for questions. We have some questions on YouTube as well. But this session is really good. I'll be very brief and just like to give time for the others to talk, and I will talk about the politicization that I fully agree with this issue, especially when we talk about smart cities. Lots of people come and say, well, so then you think that we should bring more technology in the cities. And so then how do we do and install the networks? I believe that this is a little bit irrelevant, like to bring more technology to the cities than bringing networks to the cities. So the technical person must understand what kind of problems the population have that must be solved in the cities. Lack of accessibility to jobs and pollution, people that spend a lot of time in public transportation, or because they have like violence in their area or in their households, and the problems, how you're going to use science and technology to solve the problems and enhance the quality of life of those people. So this politicization is quite important, but it must be done in a way of like learning from science and facts. We know that there is another kind of politicization which is more dogmatic and guided by dogmas that came from the 19th century. And before using science, they already understand the result of the research, because they know that poor people are good, rich people are bad, and the state is good and companies are bad. And then you come to that conclusion.
Science should be a mechanism through which we can review our values, and that is how we can improve the situation of the entire population. However, things should move together. That's it. Thank you, Fabio. I'd like to give the floor to Rafael. Well, I am really sorry for not being there personally, physically. I loved what Miguel said. I really miss meeting people and embracing them. I really enjoyed Fabio's and Estevan's presentation. I liked even more the challenges posed by Miguel. I'll try to be brief also, because we need to have a discussion. We already had a lot of time to talk. My comment is that the following: I agree with Miguel that from the viewpoint Miguel gave, we don't have many novelties, but from the technical viewpoint and tool viewpoint, we have lots of things. When you talk about accessibility, this concept exists and has existed for a long time. So these concepts have existed for a long time, but we have access to more and more tools and new capabilities in order to make our analysis. This makes our work more interesting. However, it creates a risk. Miguel talked about creating blind spots. I would rephrase his idea in the following way. It is not that this new technology or big data creates blind spots. It creates, for us as analysts, researchers, the false idea or the illusion that we have a full view. Actually, we have lots of blind spots, and they existed previously. The informal city, informal transportation, the transportation by boat in the Amazon region have always existed. But when we evaluate the cost of big data and resources from GTFS, we have the illusion that we now can see the whole social and urban phenomenon. It is fake, actually. It creates a risk for us that we continue marginalizing these people. It is the transportation of the river populations, it's terrible. Many people said, Rafael, I would like to make an analysis of transportability and access in the Amazon region. Transportation by boat, is that a regular public transportation system with regular hours? No, it isn't. It doesn't work because GTFS was thought for a global knowledge center in California, in the US, where they do not have this type of river transportation. Even informal transportation in São Paulo is small, but if you go to Mexico City or Medellin, many African cities, sub-Saharan cities, you will see they have a huge informal transportation. So you have some initiatives, some researchers who are trying to create GTFS for the informal transportation system, but you need to try to add those people who are facing blind spots. So I really liked Miguel's lecture. On my last slide, when I talked about challenges, after listening to Miguel, I would have updated that slide. We have the informal transportation. We have many different dynamics in the Amazon region, especially. And data from GTFS does not capture that. So this type of transportation cannot be formalized into a structured database because we do not have regular systems. So I'd like to thank Miguel for his suggestion. And with regard to the lack of politicization, I believe we have a huge risk, and many technical tools can give us a new view, not only a technical view. In my network, I try to make it as possible, as political as possible. Those who need a transportation system, when you talk about the Olympics in Rio de Janeiro, for example, or the subway in Fortaleza, which are the neighborhoods that gain more, who has more access to opportunities. So I try to make this discussion more political, trying to focus on the distribution of justice. Public policies, planning should be involved, and the most vulnerable, independent people should be included We should focus on them, especially when we look at public transportation and the poorest population that depends on that. But I confess I have not made the construction of data very political. Some cities have GTFS and others don't. Some Brazilian cities have this data, but only the transportation companies have access. It's not public data. There is a lack of politicization. Public services should make this information transparent for the population. However, all that info is in the hands of the bus company owners. They have the power to manipulate information. It creates a lack of transparency. And then I should thank Miguel for making me more aware there is a lack of politicization in the data production. We should try to reduce marginalization and reflect more on diversity. I should highlight that more. Thank you, Miguel, and thank you, Fabio and Esteban, for the opportunity of learning from you. Flávia, do I have the floor? I can say it was amazing to be here with you, to be able to talk to you from ABC, which is where I was born. And here from the Amazon region, I have been looking for new ways of increasing our geographical imagination. It was amazing to discuss with such high-level researchers. It was a privilege. I would like to close by thanking Miguel for all the challenges. I'd like to mention a sentence from Manuel de Franco, a book called Imperium, where they mention that every tool is a weapon if you know the portal. We should be selective in the creation, and we should focus on which data I should collect and manage, co-build a territorial praxis. The way I work with data should happen with the populations. They should understand the process. You can see me here surrounded by artworks. I am an artist. I will go to the field next week and I will carry my pens with me and I will call the indigenous and river populations so we can work with the cartography of memory. It is getting lost. We have no records of that. It has never been. I worked on some graffitis in the ABC region. I became an artist a few years ago. I published a few things in the city of Campinas, and we need to have new tools for collection, distribution. We will never turn our backs to these amazing technological opportunities, but we should be selective in the appropriation. We should assess how much we can appropriate in a clear language open to creativity. Once more, imagination and geographic creativity should be at the center of this project, giving more autonomy to populations, and we should try to stop this catastrophe which is happening in the Amazon region. My final invitation is that we think together and write a letter to the science from Amazon. I work at a small university. I am the only person with a doctorate in the study center. All the others are professors. They should be more integrated. The RISA network I mentioned is a challenge. I hope the RISA network can become more dense, and your assistance from the main centers will have more infrastructure, more funding for research. I made 3 attempts already to get funding for research. I was unable to get funding. I have a small scholarship. My university got me a scholarship. All these inequalities are very present, I'd like to thank you for this amazing meeting. I wish I was there physically so we could have lunch together. It's a pity. Maybe next time I can come. I'm far away. I have small kids. I was unable to join you. Flavia and all the other friends from our table, I'd like to embrace you. Thank you. Okay, we are back to our table. We will now open the floor for questions. There are a few questions from YouTube. I'd like to know if any of those present would like to make comments or ask a question. We will continue until 1 p.m. Carolina, Jerome, anyone else? I'll give the floor to Carolina. My name is Carolina. I am a professor. I work with spatial management. I cannot hear her. Carolina Pinho, I'm a professor of the program of Territorial Planning and Management, where I work with Professor Flavia. We work in territorial planning. I'd like to mention to our students who are here today to something Fabio mentioned. He said he was facing difficulties. It was easy for him to publish articles, innovative researches and applications, to publicize software and data, but when it came to sharing that tool, so the municipal authorities could use, it took a long time. So I'd like to talk to Professor Fabio. It's not a criticism. It's an interesting network. We have many universities involved. I do not see the territorial expert or expert in public policies, which is what we have here. There is a field of science, of planning, which can establish a mediation with the clients of those applications. You have an amazing application which processes data very quickly. We teach that in our disciplines, geoprocessing from the 90s, with the goal of showing the concept. It takes 1 month to prepare a map with data from source. It takes seconds using this app. But we do not have this conversation. We have no experts involved from healthcare planning to explain that it could be useful and insert that into the routine, establish negotiations and understand institutional relations. It's a very important field. Many of our colleagues study that. We have other lines of planning. So I'd like to draw the attention of our colleagues. We have integrated lines in a very cool program. So, well, we're celebrating 10 years of our program. I'd like to thank Flavia for organizing this panel. She was able to bring colleagues from computer science, our colleague from the Amazon region. I liked that he spoke about small data. Oh, I miss when we collected small data with our colleagues from the INPE. We have colleagues from IPEA who are doing amazing work. After the challenging lecture by Miguel, as usual, he's very challenging. That's why he's here. He did his homework very well, as usual. So there's the issue. This data is free. This data should be free. Why not? Can't we use our colleagues from the planning area? They are experts in legacy tools, negotiation. They can demand from the bus companies to share that data freely. So congratulations, everyone. And I'd like to thank our students and professors. We really have very capable people here. That's it. Thank you.
So we're talking about Merchant. So at least that you did it in our bachelor's program, because this session is evidencing like the role that we have in this debate. I would like to salute all the members on the table. Very interesting. And also like Miguel's intervention. So I do have like a reading what Miguel said before. So the need like to politicize like the planning debate in places that the planning, so the book that I've mentioned, that gradually it's leading us towards a direction where begin connecting things in the territories, especially in different systems. And curiously enough, this is a research agenda. It goes beyond the cities, the national policy and the reconnection with the national regional development plan. So congratulations to all of you. Very high level. Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Anybody else? Would you like to say anything?
I'm Dina Magnaye from the University of the